Art never felt like discipline. Art has always been innate. I mean, that's the beauty of growing up in a house with artists. Like literally, the living room had a person in front of an easel mixing paint. That is as common as seeing someone with an apron in front of a stove. So the idea of thinking of artists as something separate is, it has never been something that I perceived. I've always thought of art as the most natural of human activity. In fact, I think art is what made us human through time as we evolved as a species, and it's clearly what I use in my practice as a way of bringing us and helping us understand our humanity. So art has always been there, and as a young kid, I remember being an art critic before I was a painter. My dad had a small little studio in the Florida room of our home. Remember, we were refugees, very low income, and our house had a whole host of sort of issues in growing up. But nonetheless, I remember being there with my dad as we were, as he was painting on his canvas and I was next to him. I would make him Sanka coffee. Back then there was this little instant coffee, so I would boil water. I'd get the scoops of Sanka from the bottle, and I would add some evaporated milk. So I would give him his coffee, and then I would take whatever leftover paint he had, and I would be doodling and painting on small little pieces of cardboard or whatever. But before he was doing that, he would ask me what I thought of the painting, and I would, without understanding composition or color theory or any of that, I would tell him, you need more orange in that corner, you need to change that. So from a very young age, I understood that, and I also understood the power that art had, because outside of the house, it was the convener. It was the gallery where people would come together and talk about, in this case, the pain and horror of political prisoners, of the Cuban diaspora experience, of the instability of not knowing what was going to happen to you in your future. And of course, in my parents' case, they had 3 young boys that they had no idea what was going to happen to them or their lives. So I grew up in that and understood the power of art to bring community together. At the same time, I was going to school and I was fascinated by scientists. As a young boy, I never thought of myself as wanting to be an artist. Remember, artist is something inherent. I thought of myself as wanting to be a scientist. And I remember, like any kid, loving botany, loving animals, had my own gardens, all that stuff. But also my dad grew up in a fishing village in Cuba, so he would take me up and down Bearcut and Key Biscayne, and we would look at the mangroves, my beloved mangroves, and at the flora and fauna of his fishing village in Cuba. So from an early age, I was also immersed in not just the science that I would learn in textbooks and schools, but also just experientially in the actual connection, the cultural connection to land, to environment. So that trajectory is one that continued as a high school student. I loved and excelled in sciences, and then I went to the University of Miami. Those were my major. It was basically studying science. I would take the art class at the University of Miami as the EZA. It turned out that my EZAs were biochemistry and genetics, not necessarily painting, because I think I had my own rigidity as to what I thought painting was, because again, it's innate, it's me. I'm not gonna, it's what I've been doing my whole life. So the transformation, if you will, the understanding that art was something professional, something that I would be devoting my life to. Took 3 degrees, a bunch of different social challenges in the city of Miami. I started a drug rehab center here in Miami. While I was in law school, I was the chair of the City of Miami Youth Gang Task Force. I was the chair of the Dade County Bar Juvenile Courts Committee. As a law student, I traveled the United States as a national officer of the American Bar Association Law Student Division, and also as a voting member of the House of Delegates. So there was all these experiences and connections made through time. There was all these academic pursuits. I did a lot of research while I was an undergrad, was a co-author of many clinical journals, articles in clinical journals. There was a lot of work that I did through time, but it wasn't until I found the need to connect with others around difficult issues that I understood the true power and value of the art. And that happened in 1994. It started percolating early on. By early on is after I graduated law school. It started percolating. This is something I wanted to do. So I remember after many years of not painting, buying my first little pieces of canvas and paint. There was a dear friend of mine, Carol Kelly, who's a judge now, and she would paint as law students, and I would go to her house, we'd drink wine, and we'd be painting together. But that still felt very much as an escape from law school, an escape from studying for the bar. But little by little, it started happening. And in many ways, it happened in this room. This room is my studio now, but for 24 years I lived in this house. And it's in this room where I painted so many of my original works, all these series. And it was fun. I remember being in this room, listening to Collective Soul and early alternative rock bands, jamming it fully out, and just painting in this room. And that happened after the trip to Africa in 1994. I remember coming back and being transformed. I wasn't married yet. I was single, and I was 30 years old and living in this space. And at that point in Miami, I decided I'm gonna sort of pivot and use the power of art to begin to address these challenges and issues that I find important. The kind of stuff I went to law school to help address. So art to me has been something that's always been with me, but it wasn't until 3 decades into my life that I realized that it would define how I identified myself. So you don't go around identifying yourself as, hi, I am human, hi, I am a human. That's just obvious. Well, earlier on I didn't do that. Art is just something I did. I think art is something I've become, and that's where we are.